Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're watching From Surviving to Thriving. How do you spot a real-life Harley Quinn? How can you tell the difference between a female narcissist that's just a female narcissist as opposed to one combined with histrionic traits? This is a reoccurring question that I've received recently based on the playlist Dating Harley Quinn. If you have not seen that playlist, please take a look at it. It's an in-depth view of what it's like to date a real-life Harley Quinn, and it's told through the eyes of one male subscriber who lost everything: his million-dollar business, his health, almost his life. This playlist will reveal not only what he experienced while with the narcissist, the female histrionic narcissist, but also how he was able to overcome and move forward. So it's a very interesting playlist. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. So the female histrionic narcissist and the female narcissist obviously are going to have a lot in common, but there are some specific differences, and it's important to understand these differences. Thanks to so many who have sent in their stories and shared pieces of their life, there are two differences that I've noticed just in speaking with different male subscribers. One of them is the fact that when they describe their relationship, it's always with some sort of nostalgia, in the sense that while they recognize that they've lost so much, they can't seem to forget the highs of the relationship. And some of this has been covered in the other videos in the playlist, Dating Harley Quinn. But I've come to understand that the highs of the histrionic are different from the highs or the supposed highs of a covert or an overt narcissist. Now, in the situation, if you're just with a covert or an overt narcissist, oftentimes the lows are so low that an absence of abuse feels like a high. You actually think that life is getting better in an absence of abuse. Whereas the histrionic, the lows are very low, but the highs are not just an absence of abuse, but the histrionic really strives to take you to levels of experiences that are beyond what you could ever imagine. And so when the relationship ends, because the lows were so awful, the fact that you experience things that you've never experienced before with anyone else, and you feel as if you'll never experience in any healthy relationship, are very difficult for people to let go of. And it's a temptation to run back into the relationship because you feel like you'll never have that again. That's something that I've noticed just in speaking to different subscribers. And for that reason, the other thing that I realized, and it was kind of surprising to me when people were first sharing this information, was how they, if given the opportunity to go back and erase what happened, those that were with narcissists with histrionic tendencies, most of them told me that they wouldn't. As bad as it got, just the experience to be able to taste those levels of reality that they never even knew existed made all those lows kind of worth it. Now, that was hard for me to understand because most people, if given the opportunity to not have to experience an abusive relationship, not have to deal with the pain that came with it, most people say, yes, I would prefer to have had this information so I could have avoided it completely. Now, that doesn't mean that those that feel that way about the histrionic, that doesn't mean that they're ready to jump into another relationship with a histrionic. No. It just means that it's very hard for them to let go of the fact that the highs really were so high. In fact, I'd like to read to you a sentence taken from the book Dating Harley Quinn that should be out in a few months, just so that you have an idea of what it feels like. It says, "The beginning of our relationship was surreal. If ever I had fantasized about what the perfect girl looked like or acted like, it paled in comparison to what Angel was truly like and how she enhanced my life. If I were to compare her to anyone I had previously dated, there would be no contest. It would not be fair. It would be like comparing a painting done with finger paints, hanging on a refrigerator door held up with a magnet, to Michelangelo's art scenes from Genesis on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome." So with that in mind, let's take a look at some red flags sent in by the subscriber who the series Dating Harley Quinn is based on, and see what he came up with that you can look for if you're wondering if you currently or have ever dated a real-life Harley Quinn. There is one strange unifying feature nearly all men I've talked to who have suffered at the hands of a female histrionic narcissist, a Harley Quinn, possess. It's not the depth of the suffering, nor the fact that we shared the same kind of horror. No, it's way stranger. It's that given the choice to erase the experience, none of us would. Pretty universally, the experience nearly killed us, but the high is so high. The good is so good. And getting down to basics, the intimacy is so amazing that they would not swap it for all the money in the world. To me, at least, it was almost worth it. Does this mean, as a man, you should not stay well clear of the Harley Quinns of this world, or even go looking for this adventure? Of course not. I only get to talk to the survivors, to those with the immense natural reassurers needed for recovery, or great support networks around them to pull them up out of the pit of their utter dereliction they have lived at the very bottom of. Putting a little perspective on this, I was addicted to methamphetamine, crystal meth, and recovering from crystal meth was a walk in the park compared to recovering from my Harley Quinn. There are certainly a huge number of very damaged men out there who we don't hear from, who are yet to even begin their recovery. Some who even committed suicide as a result. I certainly tried. With real determination, I tried. So what are the signs that the most perfect girl you have ever met is a Harley Quinn? Well, the fact that she is the most perfect girl you've ever met is a dead giveaway. I don't want to dampen any new and potentially wonderful relationship for anyone, but humans come in 7 billion different unique forms. Finding a girl that is your exact perfect girl with exactly the same interests as you, down to the tiniest minute one, is about as likely as winning the lottery. It's the fact that the fit is just too perfect that should be a red flag. Other things that set the female histrionic narcissist, the Harley Quinn, apart from your regular narcissists are: every argument is a nuclear event. Everyone argues with their partner, but the arguments vary in scale. The Harley Quinn has only 2 modes: making your life perfect as possible or all-out nuclear war. There's 0 middle ground. This lack of middle ground is your red flag. Next red flag. If there's nothing to argue over, the Harley Quinn will create something. They have an ability to generate a catastrophe out of something that 5 minutes ago was absolutely fine and causing no one any problems. And I don't mean argue over nothing. I mean destroying something, such as a business deal or a friendship. They cannot stand normality. If you're trying to get on with the daily grind of life, they will ensure that grind ends either in a hugely positive way or a hugely negative way. As a result, you increasingly get less and less important things done. This in itself is a self-perpetuating cycle. A cycle of chaos that you never seem to be able to get on top of. If you find yourself inundated where you used to be totally on top of things, even if it's because you're having too much of a good time, take that as a red flag. Normal people recognize that work needs to be done, bills need paying, and their partner needs time to do these things. To Harley Quinn, that is time that could be spent obtaining supply for her addiction. Any potential Harley Quinn is almost certainly going to be very good looking and very flirtatious, often in a very affable, charming, and not necessarily obvious way. It's natural for men to be attracted to this type of girl. You'd be an idiot to think you can walk around with this girl on your arm and other men not drool after her. But what sets the Harley Quinn apart is that other men seem to not so much fancy your girl as almost instantly fall into a kind of semi-love with her. Helping you walk the walk. Dating Harley Quinn is equal part beyond your wildest fantasy of happiness and equal part a dive into the Marianas Trench of despair and despondency. But they want you around for the journey, so the two have to be in balance. So they have to create an addiction to the good, the amazing, the literally unbelievable. And there is a limit to that in daily life. They have a need to take you beyond daily life, and to do this, they need assistance from drugs, alcohol, and sexual excess. If you're a grown man, you have your own limits as to what is and what is not acceptable, and it's certainly not my place to tell you those. But if you find these limits, your own limits, mysteriously creeping and creeping inch by inch, that's a red flag. If you find yourself occasionally mildly shocked at what you do now and think, wow, I wouldn't have done this 6 months ago, that's a big red flag. Intimacy. Intimacy with the female histrionic narcissist is going to be the best you ever had. They will literally research techniques on the internet in order to improve their performance, and they will surreptitiously mine you for information about your inner desires, often uncovering ones you never even knew you had. But of the 2 Harley Quinns I've dated, they share some very specific traits. First, intimacy would hardly ever to never be even entertained without changing into incredibly sexy lingerie. And this could take a long time. But the wait was always worth it, as the results were absolute personification of your sexual idea of a woman. But any urgency, need, or desperation that they felt was always secondary to the need to look perfect, just for you. Always, it's just for you. It's just for you, hun. Yet they managed to get an awful lot of satisfaction from admiring themselves in the mirror. You're likely not really to notice as you are admiring them. Your attention is on them and not on the fact that they're looking in the mirror and posing for themselves. My last Harley Quinn freely admitted that she could get off on looking at herself in the mirror. She found herself that sexually attractive. But this admission only came very far down the line, so don't expect to be hit over the head with red flags like that. But if you find the number of mirrors in the house increasing, especially in the bedroom, red flag. Try removing them and see how quickly they reappear, or how nuclear the argument is over their disappearance. And intimacy, while utterly amazing, seems to be as much a spectator sport as an activity to be enjoyed in a tactile or loving manner. Harley Quinn likes her performance to be viewed, seemingly more so than felt or experienced in any other way. She wants you to watch what she's doing. It's like a reality TV show to her, and you're involved in it somehow. If you stop watching, she may well stop what she's doing and even ask you, "What's wrong? Are you not enjoying it?" As if she thinks you cannot enjoy something you're not actively watching. So if you get the overall feeling that the performance is as or more important than the intimacy or the love, that's a red flag. Emotional mechanics. You know how emotions work. They're a reaction to events, and you have little control over them. Sure, you mask them to a degree for social reasons, but if something upsets you, it upsets you. It doesn't go away because the telephone rang. People may hear it in your voice, even if you're trying to mask it. But Harley Quinn has no idea the basic mechanics of how emotions work. She knows what they look like, but she has to fake them, and she makes mistakes. For example, she will be in floods of tears over some imagined crime of yours, like wanting to eat because you're hungry. But a friend will telephone and she'll instantly be as bright as a button, as if nothing happened. Now, some people can do that. They're good at presenting a public face, but it's when the telephone call ends that the red flag gets waved. She bursts back into tears as if the call never occurred. It's the basic mechanics of how emotions work that they get wrong. One time we had received some terrible news, and I'd written it down so as to be accurate. My head was pretty mashed by this point. I watched her read it on the TV monitor that we had in the hall, and there was no emotion at all. I walked in and asked her what she thought, and she replied, "It's incredibly sad. I'm so upset by it." I pointed out that she didn't look sad, and she replied, "I was saving my emotions for later so we could share them together." "Honey, people don't save emotions for later," I mentioned, and she replied with this classic line, "Don't be silly. What's the point of having emotions if no one is there to see them?" Again, don't expect red flags of that scale to be thrust in your face. That was way down the line. In the early days, they are much, much more on top of everything they do. But if you get an icky feeling about the way they deal with emotions generally, it's a red flag. Recovery from horrific arguments. Now, we all have horrific arguments occasionally. And at first, the female histrionic narcissist seems super forgiving and never holds a grudge. But it gets, well, a bit creepy. They don't so much seem to forgive quickly and easily. They seem to forget the argument ever happened. 15 minutes after a 5-hour screaming match that has left you devastated and deeply upset, they will brightly say, "Shall we go for dinner?" Or shall we go see a movie? Now, it's nice to have someone who lets the subject drop, lets things pass by, and does not dwell on them. But that's not what she does. She gets every last milligram of the argument out of the argument and then immediately moves on. The way you might empty out a beer bottle and then get a new one out of the fridge without a moment's hesitation. Because to her, that is pretty much exactly what she has done. She has emptied that bottle of its argument, and it now has no value. It gets tossed in the recycling, and she grabs a full bottle, the next high you're going to experience together. Finally, if you're dating Harley Quinn, well, she is highly likely to really identify with one very specific fictional character big time, Harley Quinn. When Suicide Squad came out, pretty much everyone my personal Harley knew telephoned her and texted, "You have got to watch Suicide Squad. You're just like Harley Quinn, LOL." We watched it, and my Harley reveled in the portrayal as she saw herself on the big screen. She saw the sexiness and the excitement of the character that she possessed herself. But the craziness you and I see, that scares the crap out of us. That was just playful fun to her. It rang no alarm bells within her. To her, it was, well, normal. That's how she secretly lived her every day. When Harley Quinn smashes the window, takes the bag she likes, and says, "What? It's what we do. We're bad people." My Harley is thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I do. When I want some fun, I smash part of his business and I take that fun. If you're questioning, is this perfect girl my Harley Quinn? Well, rent the movie Suicide Squad and halfway through, jokingly comment, "God, you're just like Harley Quinn." If you get total approval for that comment, red